Today I have my wonderful friend from the USA. His name is Ian Howe. Now, Ian has choreographed numerous musicals. He works with Headliners Dance Competition, Platinum National Dance Competition, and Fly Dance Competition as both judge and MC. Ian is also on the teaching staff with Rise, the dance convention on the East Coast, this year. He's worked with artists such as Lauren Edson, Eva Stone, and has had many projects coming down the line. Ian enjoys teaching all over the world, and he hopes to continue to motivate and inspire through dance wherever he goes. I think if you're interested in the competition space and how that really looks like from the ins and outs behind the scenes, everything from parents to students to competitors, the administration, all of it, then this is a really interesting one. Now, I actually owned a studio for 10 years, which was non-competitive. We did some, but predominantly non-competitive. So I found this most fascinating. I think it's very interesting, regardless if you have a competition team or competitive elite stream in your studio or not. I think really understanding this space is important because it's a part of our industry. It's a big part of our industry. And being from Australia, I wanted to get a US perspective on it because, we see in the Facebook groups these conversations around competition, and all of the ebbs and flows of that, and some of the everything from the good, the bad, the ugly, and the brilliant, right? There's a lot of benefits to it. And there's also, there can also be a darker side to the competition world. Ian Howe does not hold back in this interview. I think you will find it so interesting. So I'm excited to bring him to the show. Let's go. Hello and welcome to Studio Biz and All That Jazz. I'm your performing arts business coach and host, Josephine Lancuba. This show is designed to bring you inspiration, information, and the instruments you need to create and grow the studio biz of your dreams. I will bring you a mix of solo episodes as well as interviews where I tap into the minds of industry experts. My career started as a performer over 2 decades ago. I later became a speaker, theatrical producer, and talent manager, as well as having a successful teaching career in singing, drama, and dance. 10 years into my professional journey, I became a mama of 2, and with a baby on my hip, opened up my very own performing arts studio. From hardship and humble beginnings to 4 studio locations and a multi-6-figure performing arts biz, I know how to attract students and keep them coming back for more. And in the show, I will share with you my experiences to help you thrive and fast track your path to success. I know you have a spark inside of you with dreams and goals for the future. As your coach and mentor, I'm here to help you step into your limelight and be a cheerleader in your ear each and every week. So get ready to be entertained and inspired as we talk studio biz and all that jazz. Welcome, Ian Howe, to Studio Biz and All That Jazz. Thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to talk about all the things.
All the things. I love that. I always say I do all the things.
Yes. Can't ever have this one hat. Got to have at least 5 or 6 things going.
I actually think that is, a typical trait of people in the arts, actually, that we do all the things. And I think sometimes it's out of necessity at first, but then it becomes habit after a while. What do you think about that?
I agree 110%. I've always been a person, even growing up dancing, I always had multiple things going on. If it wasn't stuff at dance, it was school or whatever. But I would definitely say, I'm trying to think, growing up, it was definitely out of necessity, just, trying to make, I don't want to say a name, but make a place for yourself in this ever saturated industry. So it was just taking whatever teaching job you could get or whatever performance or volunteer, whatever it was.
Right? Yeah. I remember the days, we're talking over 20 years ago now. I'm giving away my age, which I'm totally comfortable with, by the way.
But don't look a day over 21.
Oh, thank you. But honestly, waiting on tables and doing that while doing gigs and training and like trying to audition and all the things. So, I mean, it's probably very different where you're from. You are from Seattle, Washington, which is very, very exciting. I love having international guests on the show, and I think it's really important for our audience. I mean, we have an American listenership as well, but also predominantly Australian. And it's just great to get a different point of view. Now, you direct and MC for Platinum National Dance Competition,
Yep.
and you're also a studio owner, which really piqued my interest because I had a studio for 10 years, and prior to that have been, programming performing arts programs in schools and centers and teaching for, another decade beyond that. But I wouldn't say that I was necessarily in the competitive dance space. So that really piqued my interest because I have a lot of clients that obviously are in the competitive dance space. And I think it's a really important
Sure.
conversation to have. And I think with the American market, what we perceive in Australia to be quite big when it comes to competition, I'd really love to get your insights on that. But before we jump into all that fun stuff, I would
Yep.
love to know a little bit about your background and how, you fell in love with dance.
Oh my gosh. So I started dancing when I was 5 years old. I was watching Sesame Street, which I'm
Mhm.
sure everybody knows. And there was a tap dancer on there, Savion Glover, when he was still very, very young. And I told my mother I could do that. And she looked at me, she's like, "You think you can?" I was like, "Yep." She's like, "Okay." So she signed me up for dance lessons, and it just kind of started from there. I grew up as a competitive dancer, and I started training in tap, obviously, but then that led to jazz and ballet and lyrical and contemporary and hip hop and anything that basically I had time to do. But yeah, I grew up as a competitive dancer, going to, gosh, probably 4 to 6 competitions a year, nationals, conventions, traveling whenever I could. And then after I graduated, I actually, right out of high school, I started working on cruise ships as a professional dancer. So I did that for, oh dear, 7.5 years, which was amazing. Like, I, out of high school, getting paid to travel and perform. Really can't complain about that. Um, and then yeah, once I was done with that little stint on sea, I came back to the US, came back to Seattle, and I've just been plugging away ever since. I got back into teaching, choreographing. I started, I've owned my studios now for 5 years, so
Mm.
that's been a new adventure. Um, but I'm involved with Platinum as a director, MC, judge, all that stuff, and then I also travel personally, probably half the year, choreographing and teaching intensives, and you know,
You
just
mentioned, that you started quite young. I'm
mhm,
interested in that because, there tends to be, and I don't know what it's like in the USA in the sense of what, especially now the times have changed definitely with boys in dance, and there was a
for
big
sure.
movement recently with boys in dance.
Yes.
Boys dance too, and all hashtag boys dance too, and all that sort of thing. I'm wondering what that was like for 5-year-old Ian being a boy that loved dance. Was that a thing or it just wasn't a thing at all?
It was, oh gosh, 5-year-old Ian. I was a very outspoken little 5-year-old, so I definitely had my own motivation to go into it. And I was also very thankful that I had parents that were very supportive of that too. Their biggest stipulation was, if you want to do this, that's great, but you have to stick with it for the whole year. If you don't like it after that year, we can do something else. I
I
think growing
like
up, I
that
mean, it was,
commitment, by the way, because a lot of parents these days are much more flippant. We're seeing in the marketplace, aren't they? It's like, oh, little Johnny, if you don't want to go this week, you don't go, honey, and you can drop out.
yep. Oh, yes. Oh, my God. That's a whole other conversation. But I had a very supportive family base, but I mean, I think it was, boys didn't dance when I was growing up. It was
Yeah,
very, oh, you're dancing. You're obviously, you're gay, or you're this, you're that, all these
yeah.
different thoughts attached to it for no reason other than the fact that they just automatically thought I was doing ballet and in tights and all this. And I'm like, no, that's actually the last thing I'm doing and don't really like that as a 5, 6 year old. Um, so, I mean, it was definitely challenging growing up. I think that kids who start now at a younger age have a much better overall, I don't want to say general support system, but it's more socially acceptable.
Oh, yeah,
And
I
I
think for
think,
sure the tides have changed. I mean, I'd still say there is a stigma in particular communities or whatnot, but
yes,
definitely it's changing. But yeah, it's interesting to hear that you did have some of those challenges growing up and, you know, the fact that your parents were supportive, but also instilled commitment. And
yes, that,
obviously, you know, you've stepped into a competitive space professionally in your business. And I would love to
mhm,
know how that came about, because that's a jump, right? From being the artist to then saying, you know, studio ownership again is it can be a natural progression for many
yeah.
artists, teachers, studio owners. So we understand that. But why competitions? So tell us about that decision to go, you know what, I'm going to get involved in the competition space.
I think it's like I said, I've always been involved with it. I started competing dance when I was probably like 10 years of age. And then I was cleaning stuff, choreographing stuff, you know, throughout my entire career. Um, but a big motivation for me was, I mean, I love my studio, I love local things, but being a part of the competition circuit can open you up to just a wider audience, a wider base, a wider clientele, however you want to look at it. And for me, it was wanting to instill my knowledge and my point of view to just a wider audience, to the next generation of dancers. Because, um, I think as a studio owner, as a teacher, you have a very big, depending on where you're at, you can have a very big effect on that pool of kids that you see day in and day out. But wanting to leave a mark on a broader audience in a broader space was a big
Yeah.
motivation for me.
So
Um,
expanding your community essentially from outside the studio walls.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, also just being able to see what's out there. Um,
Mm.
I find that um, studios can get very stuck in their own little bubble, which can be good, can be bad. But when it comes to the competitive space, because it is such a big thing here in the US, you need to be different. You need to be innovating. You need to have that advantage, quote unquote, I guess. So for me, it's also as a choreographer and as a teacher, I travel 15 to 17 weekends out of the year just doing competition, directing, emceeing, judging. So I'm seeing, like this past weekend, I was in Lexington, Kentucky. The weekend before that, I was, you know, in a different state. So I'm seeing multiple states worth, multiple studios worth of different choreography. So it gives me, the one up to be like, oh, okay, so this is what they're doing now. This is what's popular here. Maybe we should be adding this. Maybe we should be changing that.
Yeah, that creative inspiration, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
Seeing what
yeah.
other people are doing. Sometimes the culture of competition can be depicted as questionable by some. I would
Mhm.
love to hear what your thoughts are on that.
I think that there is always a matter of truth in what is put out there. Yeah, it is. I grew up in a competitive space, but I also grew up in a space where it wasn't about the trophy at the end. The trophy was nice, the recognition was nice, getting a scholarship, getting all of that is wonderful. I think that there is a time and place for that type of mentality going into it. But in the end, for me, competition was about the adjudication, the comments from the judges that were there, and better, like, are you hearing the same thing from them that your teachers are telling you? Or, are they seeing something different? So that's what I was always brought up on. So that's what I try to instill in my dancers. Um, but there is a rather large section of the competitive world where the studios are all about the trophies, the scholarships, the recognition, and that's all they care about. Um, some do go to lengths of where it's not nice, where it does get nasty, where it is their well-being and them winning is more important than anything else. And I've seen that, I've experienced it.
What lengths? I want to hear the
Oh.
lengths that they go to. Give us the juicy bit.
One competition I was at, there was it. Oh yeah. Oh, I'm trying to
Don't
think.
have to mention names, just this competition.
No, for
What
sure, for
happened?
sure, for sure.
Yeah.
I've been at a couple competitions where I've seen kids will actually on purpose go up and bully, go up and verbally say things to students and teachers. I've been at some competitions where they've actually physically beat up people and done stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
Next
So I
level.
mean, it's one of those things where it's like there is that line where I go, this is just dance, y'all. It's literally just dance. It's to better yourself. Why are we spending? Why is the mentality like, oh my gosh, we have to win at no cost? You know,
Yeah.
so there is very much two sides of it. Hopefully,
What would you do as a director in that situation? Like, do you guys ever like ban people for this sort of behavior, or how does that work?
It depends on the severity of the situation. It depends on how that situation is affecting other studios, affecting the integrity of the competition. But yeah, the company that I work for, we've definitely banned people, blacklisted people from coming back to our competition. We have disqualified members. I've seen, in competitions that I've just attended with my studio or whatever, I've seen points knocked off. I've seen groups moved. I've seen studios disqualified. So there are processes. It's definitely, I wouldn't say it's rare, but it's uncommon for it to get to that point.
Yeah, for sure. What would you say then on the flip side of that? I mean, because we've all watched Dance Mums.
Yes.
But what would you say on the flip side of that when it comes to the key benefit of competitive dance from your perspective? Like you've said, okay, so this can happen, but then there's also another side to that. So tell us about the light of the competition.
You're getting exposed to other dancers, you're getting exposed to other styles. You're getting adjudications and comments from, judges that have great backgrounds and hopefully know what they're talking about as they're watching your number and offering you a way to better yourself, a way to better your dancing. And even though, there's a lot of bad stuff over here, makes it sound like that, there is a place for competition. I feel like that there is a place. Our industry is competitive by nature, regardless if you're putting yourself into a competition or you're just going to an audition to go get the next gig. So I think that there's a time and place for it. I think the hardest thing is, and really what the industry and what studio owners need to make sure that we're staying on top of, is how we're presenting that competitive nature to our students and instilling in them that this is a commitment. Go out there, kick butt, win that first overall, get the titanium double whoop-de-doo trophy, but learn from it. Learn from it, be inspired, meet new people. That's how I started working on cruise ships. I met choreographers and teachers that were associated with different companies, and I just kept going back, kept talking to them, and that's how I started working, and that's how I still get a lot of jobs that I do now, is by people that I met in that competitive world, in that competition world, and just hit them up and be like, hey, I remember you, blah, 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 blah. You need a teacher, do you need some guest choreography? So
so really building that network as well for the actual artists themselves, which is really quite important. In the groups, the Facebook groups and that sort of thing, there's a lot of chit chat around competitions. We do see that a lot. Sometimes, I would have a few questions here, because I think from a lot of our listeners are studio owners. I would love to know, firstly, before I jump into that next question, actually, as a studio owner, what are your requirements for someone to be in your competitive team? Like, how often do they have to train? Do you have to have a minimum of a particular genre that they train in? Like, what do you expect as a studio owner from your own students to then go and compete out into the world, you know?
So we have 2 levels in our competition team. I won't say 2 levels. We have 2 different levels of commitment. We have our lower level as far as like if you like the competition scene, but you don't necessarily want to commit your full time to it. They're required to go to 2 competitions plus the convention. And then our higher team is 3 competitions and a convention. So that's pretty much how we just differentiate them is like what they're committed to. But then for our dancers on that lower level team, they have to, so say they want to do a jazz dance, they have to take a jazz class, technique class, they have to take a ballet class, they have to take a tech class, which we call turns and leaps. And there's something else in there, but basically like they have that many classes.
So there's like
4
about
classes.
5 or so classes that is a requirement, even at that less committal level, which is like you know, a couple of comps and the convention.
Yeah.
So what is if that's 5 classes a week, that level, then what's the expectation for those that are doing like all the things?
It's more like we expect that if you want to be fully committed to it, that you are taking your training seriously and you want to better yourself. So that upper level, they have, you know, all those requirements, but it's 2 ballet classes, 2 tech classes,
Wow.
you know, that type of deal. So my assumption is my teacher's assumption is that if you want to be a part of a competition team, you want to compete, you want to try to get to a certain level, so we are going to try to provide that opportunity for you. And there's nothing wrong if the dancer is like, oh my gosh, this is not for me, but you still sign a contract, it's still for that year and everything. So kind of like how my parents expected me to, you know, if you're going to do this, you're going to work your butt off, you're going to commit to it. That is my expectations for the dancers in the end, is that, you know, you have everything laid out for you. These are your requirements, but once you sign that contract, this is what you have to abide by, you know, and
is that contract more of just a moral commitment rather than like, what does that contract really mean? Like if someone says, hey, we're over it, then what? Like, what do you do?
they're expected to continue. They
Yeah.
are expected to go through the end of the year, unless it is a medical thing or dad has to move, so we have to immediately move to a different state. You know, if it's something that's out of their control, we will obviously work with them and not penalize somebody for something that's out of their control. But if it's just oh hey, I want to go do soccer now because I'm bored, that's great. You can go do soccer, you can go do all the things, but you still have these commitments. You know, and we have things in our contract, both for parents and for the kid, that there are consequences to dropping things, to doing X, Y, and Z.
So what's the
So
consequence? I find this really interesting. This is the part I find interesting because I think a lot of people don't know what to do when they set up competition teams and how to instill that level of commitment. So it's really interesting to see what others are doing. Like, would you say that you have a high level of commitment in your studio when it comes to competition?
yeah, I would
Okay,
say
so
we
what
have
would
a
a
high level.
consequence be then? If they
Um,
do it, would it be
it
like
could be
financial? They have to like what is it?
it's a variety of things. So like we have, for example, we have an absence policy. So if you miss more than 5 unexcused and 2 excused absences, unexcused being like you just don't show up and you don't let us know. Excused being, hey, we have a school function, we need to go to that. After that, consequence for that is that you have to do a 30-minute private to make up your class that you're missing, or go to an equivalent class to make up. But the more severe is, you know, if you decide you're going to leave at the middle of the year, we have a $250 per dance assessment fee that we can charge to you. Because we
Like
have
an
to
exit
choreograph.
policy, an exit fee policy, essentially, is what you're saying.
Pretty much. Mm-hmm.
I like the private lesson makeup option. I think that that's really cool. Yeah, okay, cool. That's really interesting. I do find that very interesting.
Hey, studio owners, don't go anywhere because I've got a very quick announcement to make in this short break. Now, if you've ever thought about representing your students and providing them with opportunities professionally on stage and on screen, then I can help. Talent Manager Bootcamp is a short course designed to take you from studio owner to talent manager with confidence. I can show you exactly how you can provide amazing opportunities for your students in film, television, theatre, commercial, on stage, in musicals, and more. It's not rocket science when you know how, and I can show you the how, like I have for many of my coaching clients that have now gone on within 12 weeks of the course to actually open up the doors to their own agencies and booking their students for work. It doesn't matter which town you're from, Talent Manager Bootcamp can help. So if you're interested, the doors to the waitlist are now open. Link is in the show notes so you don't miss a beat. Head to josephinelancuba.com/TMB. Our waitlist friends receive little goodies as well, so bonuses if you end up joining the course, and you also get early access. So it is definitely worth jumping on the waitlist. All right then, back to the show.
What about going back to those Facebook groups, the chit chatter? I try not to get too involved, if I'm being honest. I keep my head above water on those ones. But look, sometimes people do talk about competitions having this is the one I've been seeing a lot recently, being unfair when it comes to the levels. So let's say there's particular criteria that meets different categories. And it's got to do with skills or advanced versus intermediate, etc.
Yeah.
How can you, as a competition, actually navigate that? Because I've often thought about it, and I thought it's really challenging. Like, it's not like you're going I don't know. Are you going send us a video and prove it, or are you just saying, look, I'm going to take your word for it, and then sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Like, what do you do to navigate that?
As being on the back end of it, being on the director side of it, all of that stuff, it's definitely like almost like an honor system. Like, we are assuming that you as a studio owner are going to be truthful about where your dancers are put. Because, we have a platinum. We run, oh my gosh, I think it was 65 events this year, just competition wise. And we have weekends where there are, 3 to 5 different cities going at the same time. So that's at most, that could be 3,000 numbers, going on between all those cities. There's no one that I know would want to sit there and say, okay, send me a picture or send me a video of every single one of your dances. So it really is, we are assuming and hoping that studio owners will put their kids where they're actually supposed to be. Does that always happen? No. But there are processes that we have, at least for Platinum, and I'm not going to speak for any other competition because, I don't know the ins and outs of that, but I know for Platinum, we do have processes where we can bump up dances. So like if, not as the director based on the judges, because if it was coming from the director or anybody else, that could be considered conflict of interest and anything. But for the judges, if they feel that there is a number or numbers that need to be bumped up, they have processes that they can do to alert us that they think this number should be bumped up. There's a
as in they competed in intermediate, but it should, I'm just using words that may not be your words for your categories, but they competed in intermediate, but they're going to that score is actually going into the advanced group.
Correct.
Yeah. So, okay. Can you tell when you arrive, and someone hits the stage and they're meant to be beginner, and you're like, this is BS, man. This is not real. Can you really tell? Yeah. How can you tell? What's the key? I mean, obviously technique, but how do you really know?
It's a lot of it has to do with technique. And I mean, and obviously there's a fine line because you might have an intermediate dancer that's really good at some things, but then there are other aspects of their dancing that they're not so great at or just haven't developed yet. So that's something that you have to take into account. But really, like, what city was I in? There was a city I was in um, 3 weeks ago. I don't remember which one it was. And, we had some dancers come out on stage, and it was literally just like watching them and how they're pulling this off perfectly. They had the emotion when they needed it, and just all these things. And where it's like, yeah, no, you're not intermediate. Like, you're gorgeous, but if you can get this score while you're an intermediate, you should be able to go up into elite, which is our advanced level. You should be able to go up into the elite level and still kick butt,
Mm.
which we bumped them up. And lo and behold, they ended up winning like first overall for whatever
To the
genre they were
elite.
in. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. I wonder if sometimes though, because some people can be really harsh in these Facebook groups. Sometimes as a studio, I mean, some people may do it intentionally, but I reckon there are others that don't because people have different standards. Or is there some way, like you go, this qualifies you to be this group if you have these skills? See what I mean? Like it's grey, right? So your
It's kind
level
of
and standard might be different to someone else's. So you come in thinking we're intermediate, and they're like, no, you're not.
correct. No, and correct. And I mean, and it's also very subjective depending on the competition because, we have our set of parameters that we use to figure out recreational, intermediate, and elite. Whereas, the competition next weekend might have a completely different set of parameters. So it is very, um, it's gray in that sense, but I think that's where it comes back to, we hope as you as the studio owner are going to look at those parameters and be like, okay, well, according to platinum, this is where we would put our dancers, but then according to rainbow, this is where we would put our dancers. And then at that point, as long as you're being truthful about where your students should go, then it's the competition's job to make sure that they're maintaining their rules and treating it all fairly. If that
Yeah,
makes sense.
totally. Oh, absolutely. What do you think a great competition should look like?
Fun staff, um, knowledgeable judges, fair leveling, um, using their medal system. That's a big thing for me is that if you're watching a competition and you see them giving out, you know, 56 platinums and 45 high platinums or whatever, but then there's only like one or two golds. Why did those only get one or two golds when you're obviously pushing everything up there? So I love, and that's what I appreciate about platinum too. Shameless plug, but they are a four medal system. We give those four medals. We try to make sure that we're judging what we're actually seeing on stage. So that's a big thing for me is that, if my dance gets a gold and it looks like a gold, it should get a gold. If
Mm,
my dance did a platinum or, whoop-de-doo, whatever, then yeah, they should get that. But and I want my dancers to realize that, like, yeah, you're going to have great weekends. You're going to have not so great weekends and learning how to deal with that and learning that it is subjective. Sorry, that was a tangent that way.
no, I love
Um,
that. And it is subjective. You're absolutely right. And I think,
yeah.
it's hard to, yeah, I think sometimes people are very harsh on the judges from a studio owner perspective, because it's not an easy job. Like
Mm-mm,
it's subjective completely. Of
it
course, we're
is.
looking at technique, but there's so much more than that. This is art. And
It
so,
is. It
you
is. And I
know,
mean, and that's where, like, I guess I'm of two minds of that. One, like, it is subjective. I, I focus more on technique and storytelling when I'm judging. Like, I try to look at everything, but that's like what I hone in on. Like, are you sickling your foot? Are you giving the emotion? Whatever. And you do it the next week, different set of judges, they're going to be focusing on something entirely different. That's totally fine. I get that. I think that people tend to be harsh on judges sometimes when the judges are seeing things that those choreographers or teachers didn't think was an issue. So they're not happy with that. So potentially that might piss some people off. And then it's going to be like, oh, they weren't good. But on the other side of that, you know, being a judge, that is what studio owners are ultimately paying for. That is what they are paying the $155 per pop for their soloist to go up on stage for 3 minutes. That is what they're paying for. So if we as judges don't give you feedback and constructive criticism and compliments and everything that actually help you, and always say, good job. That was nice. You should really point your toe there. That doesn't offer anything. So in that respect, I'm totally about being harsh on a judge because that is what you're getting hired for. If you're not actually judging and you are just literally saying anything that anybody could say, respectively, then yeah, maybe you shouldn't be judging, or maybe you need to have a little more training in what to say and how to say it and do it. Um, yeah, so it's a fine balance, but I can see where some judgment and some harsh comments come from if you're not delivering the product that we are ultimately paying for.
Mm. Do you think there's been a shift in the dance, the actual dance being delivered on stage versus what some people, again, complain about in these communities regarding tricks? So tricks versus dance. So sometimes people say, oh, people don't dance anymore. I've seen this thread quite a bit. I don't know if you've seen this in comments, but people don't dance anymore. It's all tricks. What do you think?
I agree with that. It's very, how do I put this? I agree with it that competition from when I started doing it, you're 28 years ago, 27 years ago, it's changed. It has changed a ton. I remember growing up when having an aerial was like the big thing. Like if you could do an aerial, that was the big trick. Now you have 5-year-olds that are popping off aerials like it's nothing. I think that there is a fine balance between the evolution of what is being presented on stage and what should be presented on stage, and also just playing the game of knowing what will get you high points. I am all for the tricks. I am all for seeing these dancers do things that I never even thought were possible, or look at and be like, oh my gosh, I would have broken in two trying to do that. But when it gets to the point of where it's just trick after trick after trick after turn sequence after trick after I'm going to stand here, give you some emotion, trick after trick, and I'm just like, okay, I've seen it. Cool. Like you're very athletic, and I think that you're very powerful, but now I want to see you hold for 8 counts and just have intensity in your eyes. I want to see you reach for something and it not just look like you're placing your hand in space and nothing else is happening. So I would say that it has definitely shifted towards showy things as opposed to really exploring movement, really exploring moments. And by extension of that, teaching the dancers what it means to do those things. I think that's my bigger gripe, honestly, is that we're expecting dancers to do all of these things now, and we're not necessarily training them properly. We're just showing them how to do it.
Yeah, that's so important.
Yeah. So and I've had some dancers that get really mad at me that I choreograph to, but I'm like, they're like, oh, can we do this? Can we do that? I'm like, well, can you show me a clean double pirouette and not turning on your heel and your shoulders down and all this other stuff? Well, sometimes like, cool, when we can do that consistently, then we'll move on to other things. Then we'll move on to the fancy terms. But if you don't understand the facility that you've been given to do dance, if you don't understand the ins and outs, well, not necessarily ins and outs, but if you just don't understand it, there's no reason for you to do it on stage until you do.
Yeah. I think that's a very good message for many who are putting these routines together, that sometimes and not just in competition, just in even just for, you know, showcase or whatever, but this feeling that they need to keep progressing the dancer to a point that is really beyond them for where they are right now. And they
Yeah.
may not necessarily, as a teacher, have the skills to actually even teach that move. Because once you move into that acro world and gymnast space, you may not be qualified, and it can actually be quite dangerous, not necessarily short-term injury, but long-term injury as well.
Oh my gosh, I have so many dancers that I've seen injured, that I've seen have long-term things, just because they weren't taught right, or um, they didn't do enough strength training, or they weren't taught how to use this muscle as opposed to that muscle, or whatever the case might be. Um, I have injuries, from various things, and I was never forced to do stuff, but there's just stuff that I brute force through, as opposed to like learning how to do it safely. And I'm turning 39 this year, and I have injuries that have plagued me for years, and it's just like, all right, kids, you can be like me and have all these great ideas, but you can get somebody else to do them because you're not physically able to. Or you can actually save your body at 16 and have a very fruitful career and still be able to do things.
Yeah,
So
totally. I mean, I've got injuries just from pushing out two babies, but that's a story for another day. Now,
fair.
there are mums out there that probably put pressure on teachers to do things like listen to my daughter wants more, my daughter wants more, right? My son wants more, right? But it's really just because we're in this yes culture at the moment where it's like people just get what they, everyone wins a trophy, everyone, it's sort of like that. But what do you say to that? Like, I would actually love to know what your like worst dance mum story is. That would be fun. Have you had one?
Oh,
Like a dance mum running onto the stage or going, "Ah," or something crazy.
I've never had a dance mom run on stage. That would be, I would actually laugh at that one. But I mean, I've definitely had some, during competition come and say, well, why didn't my daughter win this? Why aren't they doing all these things? Um, after seeing their kid dance for the first time up on stage, and then compared to all the others, it's just like, because your kiddo is talented, but they don't have the capability to do these things yet. And that's just like, well, why? You're their teacher. You should be teaching them. Like, yes, I am their teacher, but it's also my job to make sure that they don't die when they do have these things. Um, it's just I think there isn't a teacher or studio owner out there, regardless of competition or not, that hasn't dealt with at least one parent being like, well, you know what, my daughter is 4 years old, so she obviously needs to be an advanced point because she's shown just, so much potential. I'm like, great, cool. I don't know what to tell you with that. Um, I have, and it's taken me a while, but like at this point in my life, I have no trouble telling somebody, being like, we're not the studio for you. I'm not the teacher for you. Here is a list of the studios that are down the street. Here's a list of teachers that will take your business. Um, I'll even call and let them know that you're coming,
Yeah.
because it, I think that type of personality, you're never going to satisfy them. They're going to
No,
see the
and you're
bigger,
actually doing it. It's a disservice to their child, actually,
oh,
because they're
110%.
missing the steps in between from A to
Yeah.
B. Like from A to C, they're missing B. And without B, they're not going to achieve their personal best because
Hmm.
they're not actually learning and developing the skills along the way to become their personal best. And so
Exactly.
I'm totally all for that. It is hard these days, I got to say. There are parents that are really pushing that. I get it. Like everyone just wants the best for their kid and they're advocating for them. And I understand that innately as a parent. But I think there's
Of
also
course.
a reality of where you kind of need to have a bit of trust in the people that do what they do to a certain
Uh,
extent, But I think,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, that to me, that's the key thing that I wish more people would even just talk about, is that for me, like, I've been dancing since I was 5. So that's what? Oh, we're going to do some math and it's going to make me sound really old. I've been dancing for this September. I will be dancing for 34 years.
Hmm.
So that means will have been teaching for 23 years. I'm everybody's cup of tea. I know that. I understand that. When I was younger, thought I could do everything. As I'm older, I'm like, I have my specific little niche. But, within that, I know what I'm doing. And if I don't know what I'm doing, I will pass you along or try to get somebody who does. But, it's that trust. People, and this is going to be one of those opinions that I feel like studio owners and teachers want to say, but won't say it out loud, but I will say it out loud. It's bring it on. Um, People, not everyone, but a fair amount of people feel like they can just throw money, throw privates. Obviously, I'm going to spend $1,000 a month and get in all these privates with all these different teachers, and then my child should be able to blah 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 blah. I'm like, no, you can't throw money at the problem. Or not even problem. You can't throw money at the situation. You can't throw private situation. You have to trust the process. You have to trust that we are going to try to get your kid to the point where they need to be. But not everybody develops that quick. Some kids get it like that, and by 10 years old, they're just going to be the next big thing. Some kids at 10 years old, some kids at 15 years old still don't know their right from their left.
Yeah. And they've had the same
And
amount of training potentially as the other person.
exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. So that's the biggest thing that I feel like, especially now, and I mean, this bleeds over into the competition world too, is that they feel like dollar sign equals
Results, really.
results, success, which really it doesn't. I know kids that train a couple hours a week and they are more dedicated, they want it, and they are learning better life skills by wanting it, by not having the access to everything. Where there are kids who train 20 hours a week, and you would think that they just woke up from a nap because they just kind of meander and pick their nose and go into class. And I'm not saying that's everybody, but I think that is a bigger thing that has become a bigger thing in the past couple of years, is that it is very much, people assume if we just throw money at it, it's going to get better, when that's not the case. You have to trust the process. You have to trust us when we say, no, little Susie needs to stay in level 3 again. She's not doing this, and this. Or, hey, let's see if we can work on this to get her up to level 4, or whatever the case might be, and not just come out of being like, well, she's been in level 3 for 2 years now. Why hasn't she progressed? Well, let's talk about that, and having those conversations.
Which can be difficult ones. I mean, look, I could throw as much money at, becoming a professional swimmer. I don't think you could. It doesn't matter how many private lessons I do. I'm telling you now, I'll never be an Olympic swimmer. So,
Exactly.
it's just the way it goes. You mentioned, throwing money at things doesn't necessarily equate to, success. And that leads me into my next question quite beautifully. Thank you for the segue there, Ian.
Of
What does
course.
success look like to you?
Success in what capacity? In what
For you
context?
personally, like, how do you define success?
Oh. For me, when there is I would say there are a couple different things. Like, if a dancer has an aha moment, whatever that aha moment is, if it be they finally felt that muscle that we've been talking about for 5 years, and when they're pointing their foot, they're like, oh my gosh, I finally feel that. Or if they conquer a trip, or if they have a performance that they just come off stage and they're like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. That is, to me, that is success. I could care less. I mean, yes, I always tell my dancers, if you go get first place overall, especially like over this, and this, great, let's go. We're going to celebrate it. But then we have to work harder for the next time, because you just set the standard here. You always have to keep building. But I
Feeling
think
like you've done your job, like you've actually,
done my job. And for my studio, when I took it over 5 years ago, like, the studio's in its 20th year, so I bought it already established, it already had staff, whatever. So it was me just kind of coming in and putting my own touches on it. But I'm obviously biased. I want everybody to dance. I want everybody to try to make it a career. But my bigger thing that I tell people is like, I'm just here to make better humans. I'm here to hopefully give people the tools that they need to be better humans in life. So if that means work ethic, morals, uh, confidence, passion, empathy, whatever it is, um, that's what I consider success. That's when dancers are able to look back, even if they don't continue with us and they don't dance, a lick of time in their life after they graduate, or even when they're younger. But if they can look back and be like, "You helped me, thank you. Because of this, I was able to do this." That to me, I think is the ultimate success.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that,
Yeah.
and I think that's very powerful. So, in relation to that, so you're talking about, inspiring that next generation, I suppose. Who or what inspires you?
Oh, that is, hmm, it changes every day because I don't necessarily know what's going to inspire me in the moment. I think for everyone, when the pandemic hit, especially, our industry just got upended. It became the opposite of what we all knew and what we knew how to deal with and how to cope with. Uh, the thing that we used to cope, we couldn't do with other people. As a studio owner, trying to figure out how to make an in-person business all virtual and still work is everything. So I think every day just finding something that brings out the positive, even if it's a little thing, is inspiring. Because I know that, like, for me, there are a lot of people that I mentor, not just student wise, but teacher wise, studio owner wise. So, I mean, it's a lack of sounding pretentious, but like, I know I've had people that are older than me or that, our new studio owners been like, no, you helped me, you helped get us through this. You have inspired me to do this. So it's weird to think about being that person or being that element that has inspired others, even though I'm a teacher and I've been doing it for years and all that. It's still very humbling to hear that. So I just try to take in everything that I can, positive and negative, because I think you can find inspiration in both. And just try to take it all in.
Yeah.
And wherever that takes you, is your choice.
Yeah, I love that. So what is next for you, Ian? What's coming up next in your world?
Oh my gosh. What isn't? My studios, we just opened up a third location, so we're trying to get that fully functioning and running. For me personally, I'm trying to finish up my summer schedule as far as guest teaching and choreography. I'll actually be coming to your side of the pond excuse me, end of September, beginning of October. I'm going to be in Australia for 2 weeks, hopefully teaching and seeing people and all that.
Oh,
So
wow, that's cool.
yeah, I'm
Whereabouts
very
in
excited.
Australia are you going?
Oh my gosh.
Which city?
Sydney,
Yep.
Hervey Bay, Brisbane, and then Shell Harbor, I
Yep.
believe. Yeah, those are what I
So
know
you're
of
really
thus
jumping
far.
about. Oh, cool. That's really
Yeah, yeah,
exciting.
yeah,
Are
yeah,
you
yeah. So
running
yeah,
workshops here or teaching at studios or just catching up with people?
yes, yes, and yes.
Okay, cool.
All the things, all the things. Um, oh my gosh, what else? I have a new company called Influx Dance, which is uh the emphasis is trying to bring in dancers to a non-competitive space to work on picking up choreography, picking up um stylization very quickly, and then being able to perform it. And then by extension of that, an assistant program. So giving the kids actual paid opportunities to learn how to assist, either be in the classroom setting or in an intensive setting, and then ultimately teaching them how to create their own classes so that if they want to go guest teach, they have the tools to do that. I think, is there anything else currently? Those are the biggest things right now. It's a lot of guest
that's
teaching,
a lot. There's a lot going on.
Again, 5 or 6 things at least.
Yeah, all the things. Okay, so if people want to find you, and we can pop a link in the show notes for them, where can they check you out?
For me personally, you can just go to ianhowedancer.com. So IANHOWE dancer.com. If you're in the States and you want to check out my studio, great. Yeah, I was gonna say packwestdance.com. My Influx, what I was talking about, influx.dance is that website.
And what about the competition, Platinum National Dance?
Danceplatinum.com.
Awesome. I love that so much. All right, rock and roll. Thank you so much for being on the show today. You have been wonderful. And again, I really appreciate those insights and having a wonderful international guest here. And I can't wait, for your experience here in Australia. Make sure you reach out on the DMs and tell me how you go.
Oh my gosh, for sure. No, I'm so excited. For me personally, I loved Australia when I was on cruise ships. So it's been a dream of mine to be able to go back and actually teach and just see the wonderful country again. So I'm super excited to get back there.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.
This episode was brought to you by my signature group coaching program, Studio Biz Success, an amazing and accessible online educational platform for performing arts studio owners designed to help you grow your business with confidence and get your results. Check it out at josephinelancuba.com along with other great industry resources to help you leap into the studio biz you deserve. If you love this episode, be sure to share it with your friends. You can tag me on social media at Josephine Lancuba and give it a review. Your support helps the show to grow so I can continue to provide you with useful, informative content. I'm Josephine Lancuba, your biggest cheerleader. Thanks for listening and shine bright.